1945. He grew up and raised his family near Alexander, Iowa, a town of 168 people. He is a farmer and a small business owner. Tom, along with two of his brothers, ran Latham Seeds, the family seed company that his father started in 1947. Today, the company is operated by Congressman Latham's nieces and nephews, making them the third generation of the family to run the business. Latham, the dean of Iowa's delegation in the U.S. House of Representatives, has established himself in Washington as a champion of fiscal responsibility. He is Iowa's only member of the House Appropriations Committee, considered to be one of the most influential in Congress. Through his work on the committee, Latham has provided significant support for Iowa's Homeland Security first responders, law enforcement, the Iowa National Guard, transportation projects, agriculture, environmental and public education initiatives, health care, community, economic, and small business development. Congressman Latham serves as the chairman of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. He also serves on the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Agriculture and the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Homeland Security. With that, I would like to welcome Congressman Tom Latham up here to speak to us today.
You don't have to hide behind that. Absolutely not. Please be careful.
Thank you very much, Mary. And it's great to be with you today. And I see a lot of familiar faces. And we have Mr. Boswell Stalker here with us today. So, but it is great to be with you and appreciate the chance. We've been all around the new district. Actually, was here in Altoona yesterday at Ziegler, touring there, and that's an amazing operation they have out there. You should be very proud. I think it's exciting compared to so many other places in the country, the opportunities that we have here and for the growth, the kind of economic environment that we have in comparison to say if you're in Nevada or Florida or someplace like that today. Certainly the economies are really struggling, and we're doing comparatively very, very well here. But it's fun. If you're probably familiar with the new congressional districts, we have gone from 5 to 4 now, and so it's dramatically changed the way the districts are made up. And looking forward to representing Polk County and everything over to Council Bluffs and Southwest in the next district. I currently have Dallas, Madison, and Warren counties in my district. So it's like home. My wife and I have just moved to, or about 6 months ago now, I guess, to Clive. And 37 years ago, when we first got married, we lived in Clive for a year. So obviously we haven't gotten very far in life back where we are. But I grew up at the big town of Alexander, like Mary said, a town of 168 people. I always say we live in the suburbs on a farm a couple miles outside of town. My wife and I have 3 children, 5 grandchildren. They're all in Iowa. We're very blessed in that way. So we get to see them quite often. 3 grandchildren in Grimes and 2 up at Spirit Lake. So fortunately, we get to see we find out you should have had them first. You know? Anyway, and as Mary mentioned, and you read it just like I wrote it.
I tried.
Yeah. I serve on the Appropriations Committee, and if you're not, there hasn't been any chairman on an Appropriation Committee in this area since Neil Smith, going back to those days. So
wow.
It's a position of a lot of responsibility. My bill is about $120 billion, and we look at compared to the state budget, that's $6 billion. So my one of 12 appropriation bills is about 20 times bigger than the state budget for Iowa. So, but it's been very interesting. We work very well on a bipartisan basis on the committee because we're actually, the appropriation bills are the ones that have to pass every year to fund the government, and so we have to actually work together to get things accomplished. As I go around all the time, visit with especially small businesses today, people in the financial institutions, what I hear continually is the concern they have with the uncertainty that's coming out of Washington today. You really don't know, as we were talking about, the death tax at the end of this year, but all the tax changes that will come into place if in fact nothing happens. Your marginal tax rates will go up. Capital gains would go up from 15 to 20%. Your dividend taxes go up from 15% to whatever your marginal tax rate is. On top of that, there's another 3.8% surcharge for the health care bill on top of that. So you could have an effective rate on dividends about 44%, which is way beyond what any of us ever believe should be paying. It's certainly way above. You add tax for the state and all the taxes, everything else on top of it, we're getting to a very, very, very high tax rate. But in addition to, and we also have the alternative minimum tax now, which is affecting a lot of folks, which has to be addressed. And what I'm talking about is a very busy lame duck session, because what's going to happen after the election is where these decisions are all going to be made. A bigger issue, though, is the regulatory burden that we're seeing today. And I hear it every place that I go. You talk to anybody in your local banks, your small, large financial institutions, the new regulations coming down with Dodd-Frank that have nothing to do with safety and security of those financial institutions, but they're in essence just to make a bureaucrat happy in Washington and have no place as far as what offering services, actually going to limit services available, products available from your banks. I think you're going to see a tremendous amount of consolidation of the hometown banks just because of the inability for them to be able to afford to comply with all the new regulations. When you look at agriculture, the EPA, what they're doing as far as dust, new regulations, what basically they're saying is that if you're going to harvest soybeans, you have to wait until it rains, because otherwise there'll be dust coming off, or you can't drive down a gravel road because there'll be dust coming off of the thing. Yeah, it's just, those people need to get out more. This is my feeling. But when you look at farm families, the Labor Department is trying to tell farm families that your children can no longer be involved in that family farm operation. Stuff like that is just crazy. But you hear it all the time, and the uncertainty that's out there today, I think, is the biggest reason that if there is a slowdown in the economy, that people are not hiring like they should or would like to, is because of that uncertainty. And when we get into the lame duck session after the election, everything depends upon what happens in the election as to the results. But you're going to see all the appropriation bills. The House at least passed a budget this year and last year. The previous year, under Speaker Pelosi, they decided not to even attempt to try to do a budget. The Senate hasn't done a budget for 3 years now. We're $15.7 trillion in debt. We have $1.3 trillion of annual deficit, and you don't even do a budget. How many of you are able to run your business without a budget, or your home without a budget? It is just irresponsible. And that's, because of that, we're going to have to address the spending bills. Excuse me. I think the allergy, anybody else the allergies right now? Anyway. But we're going to have to address the appropriation bills, all of the tax bills. There's a sequestration, which is going to cut another $1.2 trillion over 10 years, and primarily out of places like defense, where they're already taking massive cuts under the current budget plans that are in place from the debt ceiling agreement last year. So there's going to be a huge amount of work to do in the lame duck session, and again, everything depends upon what happens in November this year. So anyway, what I would really rather do is to, all that happy news, you know, I would much rather answer questions than try to respond to whatever you want to talk about here today, too. So, come on,
I'll be the
Sure.
first one. I'm usually the first one at the buffet table. So.
I'm right behind you.
That's how you breathe down my neck. What kind of discussions are being made or talked about? Obviously, we're so far away from Washington about making Social Security more solvent and last longer. I mean, such as maybe raising the cap, raising the retirement age. I see some millionaires getting paid Social Security and they just call it pocket change and just, you know, play money. And then I see my parents that they're using Social Security to survive. So how do we, what discussions are being made to make it?
Well, there are a lot of suggestions out there, and some of them I agree with, and some of them I probably don't. You know, raising, it is suggested to raise the age for retirement. It is suggested to take the cap off. I have to be careful what I say because they'll use it in a commercial against me.
I'm sorry.
No, well, it's true because that's the way they operate. But you know, that's you know, changing the consumer price index that gives the increases each year. All of those things are suggestions. There, you know, there's talks about having individual ownership of your portion of a portion of your Social Security. I mean, all these are suggestions. When you look at the whole budget, is, you know, Social Security is one that is out there a ways as far as the financial insolvency. The more pressing problem certainly is Medicare today. And because of the health care bill that was passed where they took $500 billion out of Medicare to fund a separate new entitlement after people had paid that into Medicare, the bankruptcy date moved from 2029 to 2024 just last year, in 1 year, because of that. And that is a much more immediate problem, and the increase in costs in healthcare in general, but certainly with Medicare. You've got 10,000 people a day signing up for Medicare. And that is something that needs to be addressed.
But what about Medicare Advantage? I mean, is that
well,
going to go away? Because that wasn't funded, I thought.
Well, they took a lot of the $500 billion out of Medicare Advantage that people like very much. I mean, no, it gives you additional benefits beyond what normal Medicare would give you, or the Part D, you know, drug plans would give you. But you know, that when the entitlement portion is over 2/3 of the budget. And you've got Social Security, you got Medicare, you got Medicaid. When you have welfare, you know, you look at the highway bill, you look at ag subsidies, all those things are mandatory spending. That doesn't go through the appropriations committee every year. And you could actually do away with all of the discretionary spending in the budget and still have about a $250 billion deficit. And that includes interest. You know, the discretionary doesn't include interest, but the 2/3 of the budget. And you look at what, if we continue on the path we're on, we're going to be, according to the President's proposed budget, which incidentally was rejected unanimously in the House of Representatives, it was also unanimously rejected in the Senate, both Republicans and Democrats. No one voted for it. But what he would propose would be to increase the deficit about $10 trillion, or the debt about $10 trillion over the next 10 years. And to service that, I mean, we are at, how many, we have bankers here, we're at all-time historic low interest rates. If you get back to what would be an average normal interest rate to service that debt, you're talking about $1 trillion a year just in interest payments. going to places like China and all that. And at that point, we don't have 5 more years budget-wise. We really don't, especially if interest rates go back up again. It'll just compound. We understand the miracle of compound interest, whether it works for you or against you. And that it's going to start really working against us very quickly here. But no, there's a lot of suggestions out there. Medicare is a much more immediate concern, and that's where the real explosion of spending is. That was really a long answer.
That's what we need to hear.
Yes. Come on, Kate. Yes, there she is.
Agriculture is a driving force in the economy here in Iowa. And several years ago, a bill was passed to improve the Mississippi locks and dams. However, no money was appropriated.
Right.
Do you have any idea as to would that money come from your department or your
Well,
committee, or
that's
does it
in
need
the
to go back to
energy.
transportation?
It's in the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill, which funds the Army Corps of Engineers. And we've been trying to increase that funding. It is absolutely desperate situation. Some of those locks, dams are, they go back to the 30s, and they're in horrible shape. If we have a break or something, it would be disastrous.
It would be for
It would be for
or any industry because
Right.
of the import-exports.
And it's just a matter of, one problem that the Army Corps of Engineers has is that they can't move a shovel of dirt until they do 8 to 10 years of environmental impact studies and all of these types of things. And they can't, and once they start doing something, they get sued, and it's more a legal defense department than it is an Army Corps of Engineers anymore. And that's where a lot of the money that would go into actually repairing them is going to basically do all these studies that go on forever. It's the same with the highway bill. If you have a new project, it may take 7, 8, 9 years to do all the impact studies before you can actually build a road or a bridge. I mean, it's amazing, and that's one of the reforms in the highway bill that we're pushing very hard, is to have an expedited way of actually getting these projects going, rather than study them and study them and study them and not ever get anything done. No, it's very frustrating, because we've been trying and have actually put more and more money into it, but it gets burned up doing other things all the time. We are really good people at studying stuff. We study them very closely. Yes?
So what happens when you try to expedite the highway, for instance? How long does that take?
Well, we would still be, rather than talking about a new project, a new road or something, you're talking 7, 8, 9 years usually. You could get